How is the Chinese Dharma course doing? Good. I am not worried about the Chinese course. The Chinese people are unlike other foreigners. They focus on wisdom, so they get along pretty well with my teaching. The Westerners like doing concentration meditation. They believe they already have the wisdom. In fact, they don't have any. The world wisdom is different from Dharma wisdom. The world wisdom only helps us live better. It is not the path to the end of suffering. Somebody is smart but lacks of morality. That doesn't really make life happy. However, with Dharma wisdom, the more you gain, the more stable the mind becomes. With consistent mindfulness practice, our mind will be content. It is happy. It doesn't matter if you are rich or poor, you will still be happy. If a problem occurs in life, we still are happy. For example, like when having an illness, for others who haven't practiced, the mind will be depressed. For us who practice, when the body is ill, the mind does not get ill because the mind is separated from the body. So, keep practicing. Observe to identify components that are compassed to be ourselves. When the body is ill, the mind will not get affected. When we encounter disappointment or dissatisfaction like the husband or the wife cheating on us, others who don't practice will suffer so much. However, for us, we will only suffer slightly because we already realized that it is the way it is. In life, all things are temporary. Married life and good life and such are all temporary. Nowadays, so many Thai youngsters are addicted to drugs. There's a problem that teenage boys and girls are having sex at a young age. If the parents haven't been practicing mindfulness, they will emotionally suffer. If we have been practicing, we would realize that even our child is not under our control. Why is our child not under control? It's because even our mind and body are not under our control. How can we control others? When we study the Dharma or the teachings, we must learn the truth of our mind and body often. When we see that the body is under the three characteristics, suffering, impermanent, and uncontrollable, as well as the mind, when there is a life problem that we encounter, our mind will not be depressed or negative about it. There's no need to maintain the mind. Awareness, concentration, and wisdom will all be protecting our mind automatically. Thus, the mind that has been well trained will be happy by itself. When there's a contact to the six senses, awareness, concentration, and wisdom will arise in replacement of defilements. The things that cause us trouble, worries, and mental illness are defilements. The defilements just sneak into our minds. However, when we are mindful of ourselves, we see when the defilements arise in our minds, and then also the mind has the right concentration observing leading to the wisdom. We know that everything is temporary, everything is uncontrollable. When a defilement arises and we are aware of that, the defilement will fall away by itself. Therefore, do not make the defilement disappear. The defilement will disappear by itself. When the mind wanders, going off and we are aware of that, the mind will gain the right concentration automatically. When seeing that often, you see that the mind goes off to see, to hear, to think, and to be wholesome, unwholesome, happy, and unhappy. The wisdom is developed, realizing that this very mind is non-self. To the point when you practice until you realize that the mind is non-self, you will achieve the beginning level of Dharma. The mind is the most difficult thing to realize that it is not ourselves. Realizing the body that it is not us is easy. Those who aren't Buddhists can even realize that the body is not ourselves because it is obvious. When seeing people getting old, getting pain or illness, and death so often, the mind accepts it. It is easy to see that the body is not ourselves. The most difficult thing to realize that it is not ourselves is this very mind. Don't you notice that in here there is a feeling of being me, We understand that we as of now and we as a child are the same person. Our face keeps changing, but the mind feels this is still me. For the mind this year, the mind next year, the mind in this life, and the mind in the next life, it's still the same person. Therefore the mind sees that this mind is stable, permanent, and me. Such understanding is wrong understanding. In the beginning, if the mind sees that the mind is me, then the other things will be mine. For instance, when seeing that the mind is me, the mind sees that the body is mine. This is my body. Here's my stuff. Here's my money. It keeps extending things that are mine. Next, here's my country. Here's my religion. There are so many things that are mine. However, if the mind sees that the mind is not self or me, there is no mine. Therefore, seeing the mind as me is the root cause that extends being mine. Somebody is extremely attached to it. Keep observing the mind. One day if you have realized that the mind is not yourself, anything in this entire world would not be you nor yours. Those who do not practice still see that this entire body is me. On the other hand, if we start practicing, the mind and body are separated, the body moving while being observed by the mind, we will realize that the mind is me, but the body is mine. The mind is the owner of this body. Therefore, the body becomes mine instead of me. You start to see it. Do you see that being me and being mine are not equal? They do not weigh the same. For instance, being me is very important while being mine can be sacrificed. When the house is on fire, it means that my house is on fire. We run outside the house. Why run outside? We run because we want to save ourselves. We feel that this is me. Others that do not practice still see that the body is me. For those who practice, we see that the body is not me, but it is still mine, just like the house on fire example. The body resides in the house while the mind resides in the body. When we have the wisdom, we see that the house is not me, it is just mine. When there's fire, we can abandon the house to save ourselves. So when our practice is getting refined, we will see that the body is not me, it is just mine, realizing this mind is me that resides in this body. It feels like that. Step by step. The body is like a house for the mind. If the body is in a disastrous state, the mind will abandon the body. It escapes to save itself. For instance, if the body is having a severe illness, I have seen it before, that person is my father. He was having diabetes, also kidney failure. Extremely painful. He was shaking the bed's steel cage in the hospital. He shouted out loud, "When are you going to let me die?" He was getting frustrated. Why? It's because he no longer wanted that body. The house is wrecked. It no longer provides happiness to the owner, so the owner now wants to seek a new home. The mind is the owner that wants to move out to the new house. With more practice, knowledge is getting refined. The mind will realize that the mind itself is not me. Why is the mind itself not me or an entity? The mind itself can be observed. Can a wholesome mind be observed? Can an unwholesome mind be observed? Can a happy mind be observed? Can an unhappy mind be observed? Can a mind that sees visual be observed, as well as hears sounds, smells sense, tastes flavor, senses physical contact, and thinks? We can be aware of those types of minds so the mind can also be observed. Eventually, we will realize that the mind is not me. The mind can also be observed, so literally there is no me. Being me is only just a feeling or an illusion. When realizing that the mind is not me, everything in this world will never be me. First, it begins with understanding that the mind is me. Then the result is the understanding that the body is mine. Then, with getting more stupid, there is the understanding that the body is me. Then it extends the wrong perception. This is my house. This is my child. This is my wife. This is my family. So many things that are mine. That is my job. That is my stuff. That is my reputation. The mind-being perspective just keeps extending. For those who do not practice, since the mind-being perspective extends endlessly, they will have more burden and more burden. When those things are defined as mine, there is more burden because there are more things to take care of. However, when we practice, we see that those things that are mine are just some things that we borrow from the world. One day, even though we are rich having so much money, we have to return it to the world. It will be given to others. When we buy a new house, we pay lots of money for it, being in debt and trying to pay off the mortgage. We wish to stay in this house forever, but the truth is we cannot. How can this house really belong to us? One day, we will not stay in it. We do not stay because we have to move out. We do not stay because we die. Then the house will consequently belong to others. Sometimes, our enemy or someone we hate is the one that will become the new owner of our house. You believe this is your wife. When you die, your wife will belong to someone else. You believe this is your child. When your child is grown up and gets married, your child then belongs to someone else. You are no longer the owner. Your son then has trust in his wife more than the mother. Therefore, anything that we think is ours, one day it claims that it is not ours. If we still believe that the thing is still ours, we will only be disappointed. Our mind will suffer. If we practice, we will realize that all things are not ours. They are just ours temporarily. One day they will be apart from us, even our bodies. One day the body falls away even though we are still alive. For instance, one day you get diabetes that the doctor has to cut off your finger. Without diabetes, there is no way that you will let the doctor do that. We love our toe so much, however it is infected and rotten, and we have to get it cut off to save the rest of the body, because the rest of the body still belongs to us. Therefore the mind will only suffer because of the burden that we have to maintain the things that are ours and to keep ourselves happy. It is full of burdens. Therefore, we have to learn the truth of ourselves until one day we realize that the body is not ours. Does the body ever tell you that it belongs to you? Touch it. Touch your arm. Does it tell you that it belongs to you? It doesn't tell you, does it? The mind instead that says this is my arm. Therefore, the body itself is not defined to belong to anybody. On the other hand, it is the mind that defines the body as ours. With a decent practice, we will realize that this body is mine instead of me. When the proper practice, this mind will no longer be me because the mind is not controllable. The body is not us because the body itself is not controllable. The body ages. The body will get ill and suffer. The body will die. There's nothing we can control. When we observe the body over and over, again and again, eventually, we will realize that the body is not us or ours. For the mind, we see that the mind moves and keeps changing at all times. Sometimes it is happy and unhappy, good and bad at other times. There is nothing we can control. At some point, with the wisdom, we will see the characteristics of the mind, thoroughly realizing that this very mind is not me. When the mind is not me, there will never be me afterward. The thing that we attach to the most to be ourselves is the mind. Therefore, when we are mindful of our minds and body, seeing the three characteristics of them, that they are suffering, temporary, or uncontrollable, it will begin to detach or stop clinging. First, it will stop clinging to the body, seeing that the body is not me, and then the mind is not me. When the mind is not me, there is no me in this world. It will understand that clearly. If the mind is me, it extends it to the body and other things. When it reaches the limit to define those things as me, it will define them as mine. For instance, those who do not practice see the body as me. Anything outside this physical body is defined as mine. These are my clothes. This is my family. This is my house. Anything keeps becoming mine, even a big thing. This is my country for nationalists. This is my religion for religious folks. I am mad at those who criticize my religion. I want to kill them. I can sacrifice or do anything for my religion or for God. The truth is, those things do not belong to us, but instead belong to the world. Everything belongs to the world, even this very body. This physical body is developed from the genes of the father and the mother. Don't you see it? The genes from the father and the mother are not ours. When we are growing up, this body is being nurtured by water, air, food, and nutrients from the world, but we cheat by claiming that this body is ours. Literally, this body belongs to the world. We borrow it. When it is due, we return it to the world. Then is decomposed to various elements back to the earth. They get recycled for the use of others. For instance, when this body dies, it is buried or cremated, decomposed into other elements. Plants and animals will reuse those. Later on, we consume those plants and animal as a cycle. Therefore, we are eating corpses and all of that stuff. We eat chickens, ducks, and pork, which eat all other plants and animals before they get slaughtered. They all belong to the world, as you can see. Therefore, keep learning the truth of the body, and you will see that the body belongs to the world, not belong to us in the first place. The minds and the phenomena are just feelings. Actually, the mind is consciousness. There's no self in it. It is simply just consciousness. When it occurs through the eyes, it is consciousness through the eye. When it occurs through the ears, it is consciousness through the ear. When it occurs through the mind, it is consciousness through emotion. Therefore, the mind itself does not represent a self or any entity. It is just consciousness. Also, happiness and unhappiness are non-self. They are just feelings. Feeling happy is non-self as well as unhappy. Good, evil, greed, anger, and delusion are also just feelings. The mind itself is just consciousness. It is not an entity. It is not human or a person. It is not an animal. It is not me. It is not him or her. It is just a consciousness that perceives emotions. When it occurs through the eyes, it is consciousness through the eye, as well as the other five senses, including the ears, the nose, the tongue, the physical body, and the mind. At some point, when we are mindful until we see the consciousness, we will find out that consciousness itself is not me. Do you see what I mean by consciousness? When saying about the minds, we usually imagine a visual representation of them. Mind is a noun. It is like there is one elephant or there are many elephants. The mind is consciousness, but we say minds because there are different types of minds. That's all it means when referring to minds. When we understand the mind clearly, there will not be different types of minds. It is just consciousness. No movement. When we practice until we become Arhat or fully enlightened, it will be consciousness that is completely purified, not consciousness with defilements. The consciousness that most of you have is stupid consciousness still, so it has a wrong understanding that this consciousness is me. Also, this body is a house for the mind to reside in. The body is mine, or even more stupid, this body is me. It extends the self from the mind to the physical body too. Then it extends the being mind to all things in this world. This is my world. Some countries want to take over the world. Whichever country they want resources from, they dispatch troops to that country. In history, Westerners see the Easterns and Africans as animals. Whatever they want from them, they get it with force and violence, taking over everything. China was having over 10 countries that tried to take advantage of When one's mind contains evil or very strong defilements, it will not see others as human. Instead, it sees it as a resource wanting to take over and make it as a slave. It did not see the others as humans, but machines or animals or pets. When the mind is developed through mindfulness practice, it gets better seeing that the others are human and should give them respect. When we practice Dharma, the mind will be detaching from ego or self. Without the practice, ego or selfishness gets worse. Resources within the country aren't enough, seeking more and more from other countries. Selfish. Therefore, keep observing yourself. Truly there is no self. When there is no self, why pursue things with craziness? It will always end up with failure. Like wanting 1,000,000 yuans or 10 million yuans. These days, having 10 million yuans is not that a lot because there are a lot of Chinese riches with billions of yuans, but that's just for some Chinese people. Not all of them. If all of them are billionaires, money is not worth anything, just like joss paper or ghost money. Ha ha ha. It has no value. Keep observing it. Feel the body. Feel the mind. The mind is just consciousness, not a person, not me, not him or her, or an animal. The body is just a house that the mind resides. This body we think it is ours, but it is not. In the end, we return it to the world. Just like our house, we think it is ours, but one day somebody else will own and stay in it, or the house is wrecked apart before somebody else owns it. There is no real me or mine, even our mind. It is just consciousness and emotions. Keep learning it so that the mind will collect a right understanding. When collected enough, it will realize that there's no me. If there's no me, who suffers? It is the 5 aggregates that suffer. The physical body, feelings, memory or perception, thoughts, and emotions. Therefore the body is what suffers. The feelings, happy and unhappy, are what suffer. The feelings, good and bad, are what suffer. Perception, thoughts, and emotions are what suffer. This is a higher level of wisdom so that we will learn that later. Eventually, we will see that the mind itself is what suffers. As a result, the mind will be detached from the mind itself. By just seeing all things being not me or mine, the mind is not yet detached from itself. For instance, seeing that the mind is not me, the mind is not yet detached from the body. It is like, this house is not our house, but we won't abandon our house still being satisfied with it. This car is not our car, but we won't throw away the car, still being satisfied with it. Therefore, with Satipana or the beginning level of wisdom, the mind won't let go of all the 5 aggregates because the mind does not see them as me, but it is still satisfied with those. There is no me, but the mind still attached to them since the mind still sees them as adorable. In other words, the mind notices that all the things that belong to the world are the things that the mind just borrows, but it still likes them. We don't want to return them yet because we still enjoy them. Therefore a Satipana or one that has achieved the beginning level of wisdom is still attached to the 5 aggregates because he or she still enjoys being attached to them. He or she realizes that they belong to the world, but those aggregates still brings him or her happiness. With more and more practice, we'll see that the 5 aggregates are what suffer. Starting with the body, this body is full of suffering. Why do we have to move or change body gesture? We do it because we keep escaping from constant suffering within this body. Why do we eat? We eat because it suffers or we're hungry. Don't you see? Being too full from eating suffers. Eating without pooping suffers also. This body is full of suffering. With higher wisdom, the mind will no longer cling to the body. Why doesn't it cling? It sees that the body is not a good thing. It is like living in a wrecked house with termites and debris, and the toilet is clogged and overflows, causing the entire place to stink. With that, we do not want to live in the house anymore, looking for a new house. The anagami, one that has achieved the intermediate wisdom, sees that the body is what suffers, resulting in detachment of the body. Then there's a new house in the Brahman realm, which a Brahman doesn't have a solid stinky body like a human one. The house is deliberately beautiful, more beautiful than the current one, cleaner than the current one. That's a result of attaching to the mind, still meaning that the Brahman still depends on the mind. Therefore, it looks for a better place for the mind to reside, so the mind of anagami still wants a better state of existence. Next, if we practice until we have achieved the highest level of wisdom, we will realize that this very mind is what suffers. If this mind is what suffers, it suffers everywhere in every state of existence. It is not about living in a good house versus living in a bad house. It doesn't matter how good and beautiful the house is, the owner of the house is not good, which it is desperate about finding happiness anywhere else, knowing that happiness cannot be found in this world. The mind doesn't want to exist anymore, so it is detached from itself. Without the attachment to the mind, there is no other remaining attachment to the world, so there's no attachment to the five aggregates. Whenever seeing the mind is not me, there is no me in this entire world. Whenever seeing that the mind is what suffers, this entire world is suffering, then the mind will abandon the world entirely. Entering nirvana. Seeing the mind and the body as suffering is not pessimistic because it is the truth that they are suffering. Because other people are unwise, they don't see it. When the mind sees it, it is detached, and then it perceives greater happiness. It is not happiness from a state of existence that the mind creates and resides. It is the happiness of nirvana. Nirvana is the state without desire and formation. The state without desire is called virakha. The state without formation is called visankhana. These are other names of nirvana. Visankhana is the state without formation or the five aggregates. Because there's no formation, there isn't the five aggregates. Because there are not the aggregates, there is no suffering. Nirvana is the state without desire, defilements, and without the struggle of the mind. No aggregates, no suffering. It is completely purified. It is a state that when we experience it, we realize that in this world, everything is nonsense. Nirvana is purposeful. However, nirvana is not ours. The enlightened one or the Buddha was the first to discover nirvana. When the Buddha left us, nirvana has still been around. The Buddha did not take it with him. Nirvana is here right in front of us. Whenever there is no desire in our minds, we will see nirvana right in front of us here. In order for the mind to have no desire, it has to have achieved the high level of wisdom, seeing that this very body and this very mind are not just me or mine, but suffering. Seeing the body and the mind as suffering is the highest level of wisdom. It is above world wisdom, seeing the Four Noble Truths that this very body and this very mind suffer. It lets go of attachment and will no longer be part of samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. Life will be the happiest. Keep practicing mindfulness, learning about the body and the mind. In the beginning, realize them as not mine. Later, realize them as not me. Next, knowing them as they are what suffers. Whenever seeing them as what suffers, the detachment occurs. Only seeing them as not me or not mine, or seeing them that they are happy sometimes and unhappy other times, the detachment doesn't yet occur. Because there is still attachment, suffering continues. Therefore, obtaining the wisdom is a step-by-step process. First, we'll see that they are not me or not mine. then we will see them as suffering. At that point, there's freedom.